The real picture is the engine. And I'll let you describe engines. So the quickie description is and this is what you did to me. You said, it's got a W24. And then waited for my response and was like, what am I supposed to do with that? So explain where the W24 comes from.
It's two 5.4 liter BMW V12s.
Hey, welcome to Car Guy Confessions, brought to you by ARP. I'm Jeff Smith. This is my car buddy Cam Benty and car builder Steve Strope, and we're going to tell you some stories. Welcome to another episode of Car Guy Confessions with Jeff Smith, brought to you by our friends at ARP. If you log on to arp-bolts.com, you will find everything there. I just put a small block Chevy together the other day with stock head bolts, and I was cringing the entire time because I thought for sure I'm going to pull a thread out of a block because we're talking about, building a small block Chevy that's 30 years old, 50 years old. So anyway, we have a special deal today and a new face.
Hi there.
So you want to introduce yourself?
My name's Marcel, and I'm generally on the back side of the camera.
Yeah,
so today being
a
on the
face
front
you never
side,
see.
Yes,
Yeah,
this is true. So I'm kind of cheating. I guess. Yes.
We gave Steve and Cam the day off.
They needed it. It's hot today.
It is. It is hot today. So, and our special guest star, my good friend Gary Kollofski. Now, let's just dive into this because off camera we were talking. I'm talking three cars that I want to talk about, and each one of those cars we could spend an episode on. So we sort of rolled the dice a little. Actually, we didn't roll the dice. I just decided. No. We're going to talk about the 57, but what I really want to start with is the car that made you famous, the first car, the black 55. Oh, yeah. So I wasn't, this is how long ago, kids, I'm using a Steve-ism there. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to steal it from him. I wasn't even working at the magazine in 1977, right?
76,
Hot Rod
Magazine. 76, 77.
Yeah. And Gray Baskerville did the feature on a black 55 Chevy. So if you have older issues of Hot Rod, go back and find this rascal, and we'll run some still photos of the car. When I saw the car, I was stunned. I had my 55 by that time, and it was like, oh, my car needs to be like this. And it never got close. But so describe the car.
It was a all-steel 55 Chevy that I bought from a gentleman that parked it at the YMCA in Winona, Minnesota. When I graduated from high school, it was sitting there. It was green. I finally got up enough nerve to go out and see if he wanted to sell it. This was maybe a year later. I bought it for $150.
$150. What year was this?
It was probably, I graduated in 62.
Okay.
So it was probably in the late 60s.
Okay, so you had this car a long time.
Oh, I had it for a long time,
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and then it evolved into this, morphed into this monster,
yes.
That Gary Hedden did a bunch of the work on. Big block Chevy blower through the hood. Greg Fleury did some work on it. Rich Klugertz did the wiring. It was probably one of the first pro street cars around.
Yes, long before the term came into being. And back in the day when everybody was jacking the cars up, sticking the tires this far out of the wheel wells, your tires were tucked underneath. It was low.
Yep.
And it was bad.
And
Gray shot the feature.
Yep.
And it was like, oh my God. And Scott Sullivan and I have talked about that car many, many times. And he was righteously impressed. So they shot the feature was that at the Carcraft Nationals the first year? Or was that Hot Rod show? It
was probably a Hot Rod show.
Okay.
At the Minnesota State Fairgrounds.
Oh, okay. They weren't doing Back to the 50s back then, but show version of that.
It was some version. It wasn't Back to the 50s, but it was a different version of either Carcraft or Hot Rod that had their own show then.
Yeah. So really, I mean, you look at it now and think, but back in the day, it was transformational. I think that's a good term for it.
It was a tube axle, steel front end, steel car, bucket seats, roll bar, motor wheel flies when they were famous.
Yes,
I just loved motor wheel flies.
Yep. So again, we could do a whole story on that car, and it deserves it. Believe me, it deserves it. It has essentially disappeared, right?
Correct.
Yeah, unfortunately. But
now, disappeared for real, or wait, because there are things that have disappeared before, but
it went to Detroit, Michigan. I sold it to a gentleman there who ended up taking it back to Fleury. Fleury chopped the top on it. Then it went back to him, and I think through some different avenues, it went to another gentleman in Detroit, and then it kind of languished there, and I haven't seen it since. I tried to buy it back maybe 4 or 5 years after I sold it. The woman that had it, whose husband had passed away, I drove all the way over there one winter day with another friend of mine to try to buy it back. She wanted $4,500 for it. I got there, and she said, well, no, I've been told it's worth more than that. So all of a sudden, all right, I'll give you 5.
Yeah.
Then it went to 55. Then it went to 6. And I said, ma'am, I'm biting my tongue. I really want it. I want the car, but I'm not going to go there. I said, okay, fine. So I went home, and about 3 months later, she called me. She said, do you want to buy the car? And I said, yes, I do, but I'm not going to come back and go through the same thing again.
Right.
So, yes, it just... I don't know where it is.
So sadly, yeah, and plus, with it being chopped like that, it's really not your car anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
You know? So you would almost have to. Could you unchop it? Oh my God, that would be awful. Yeah,
And-
you'd be better off just to put a whole new top on.
Right. And,
Right.
Greg redid the dash, and they did a bunch of different things on the car. And I think Kerry Weisner got the frame. He sold the frame to somebody else, and it was just it wasn't the same car.
Yeah,
pieced out,
It went out.
So then, after the 55, about what, 5 years later,
More than that, something like 5 years. And then
was the Willis.
the Willis. I bought that from. I think I bought it from Fleury, or at least I took it out. I remember taking it out there, and that evolved into a twin turbo small block that Gail had, and then I ended up going to work for Gail after that car for 2 or 3 years.
Gail Banks.
Gail Banks.
Yeah. Twin turbocharged, bright electric yellow. That was on the cover of Hot Rod.
Oh, yeah.
Probably in 79 or 80.
Something
somewhere in
along
there.
81, something along those lines.
And another amazing car. And then you kind of retired for a little while?
Yeah, I got into boats, into performance boats.
Okay, because you were from Minnesota.
You're correct.
Right.
Right
So
on the Mississippi
land
River.
of 1,000 lakes.
Oh, yeah.
10,000 lakes.
10,000 lakes.
I would shortchange them.
They'll let
I
you
live
know.
in Iowa now. I'm too close to them. So they might get upset.
Might be fighting words for a corn boy here.
Yeah. so and then you came back.
I came back.
And
Then I ended up finding this 55 that I now have. A friend of mine who was a marine dealer down in Costa Mesa said, I'm in this building looking at a boat, and there's a 55 Chevy in here. Are you interested? I said, is it a two-door post? And he says, yes. I said, is it a California car with one-piece bumpers? He said, yes.
Wow.
I said, what does he want for it? And he said, $6,500. I said, I'll take it, and I can't get the money out to you fast enough. And that was probably 15 years ago. And today, that car was an original California, built in, I believe, Van Nuys. And it's evolved into, this Godzilla car that
now
I
it's
now presently have.
V10 powered.
It's got V12.
I'm sorry, a V12.
Yep.
Yeah. Which is a marine engine.
It's a marine engine.
And because that's your background with doing boats and everything else, right?
I was on a website that this gentleman was selling these 2 BPM V12 marine engines out of a 48-foot cruiser. They were converting it to diesels. So I saw this, 2 complete engines, drives, stern drives, transmissions, and everything. And what do you want for them? I said, he gave me a hell of a price, and I said, I'll take them.
Yeah.
So he shipped me both engines and all that stuff, and ended up, I got together with a good friend of mine, Dale Pelvitt, and we ended up, I said, can we put one of these in this 55? It was a 6-and-stick and overdrive, original Californian car, and I said, it can't have a scoop on it. It's got to look original.
Right.
And
Nice.
It morphed from there.
Yeah, and now it's become a suicide door car.
Suicide door car with all the stock components.
And a tilt steel front end.
Oh, tilt hood, tilt steel front end. Everything is removable on pit pins.
And this is where I come in because you guys had shot Carcraft had shot your car at the Carcraft Summer
Correct.
Nationals, and I was running their Real Street Eliminator program at the time, so I was sequestered. I never saw the show. If people would ask me, how was the show? I don't know. I was running the event the entire time. I never saw anything. And so a couple of weeks later, Doug, it was probably a couple of months later, and we shoot features and put them all in an envelope, each individual envelopes, and then at various times spread out the rest of the year, you would take this envelope and turn it into a feature. And so Doug said, would you be willing to write this feature? And it's a 55 Chevy, and I thought, he knew I used to have one. Sure, I'll do it. And I saw your name on the cover. I went, I know who this guy is. Are you kidding me? I looked at the photos and I went, yes, I want to do this feature. And that was how our relationship started.
I got, at that particular show, I asked, was it Leonard Emanuelson?
Well, Lenny was by that time he had gone on to Motor Trend.
Okay,
So, but
anyway.
he used to be at Hot Rod back
Right.
when you were building those other cars.
When he came, when whoever shot the thing or decided it turned out to be that particular show, it was best of show.
Okay.
And I asked him later, I said, what about the car turned you on? He said, basically I walked by and it was the 18-inch wheels that first tricked it. And then he looked at the rest of it
And then it was
counted
like-
the cylinders, and the suicide doors and everything else. So it went from there.
Yeah. So Doug Ladd was the editor at the time, so he was probably the
Okay.
one you talked to.
Yep.
So anyway, that was how it all started. And then in the middle of all that, we'll now get to, because we'll save that car because there's so much to talk about that car. We could do an episode on that car too. But the one I really want to talk about is the car you're working on right now, because the 55 is done. You take it to
55 is
shows,
done.
you drive
Yep.
it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And which is carbureted.
Yep.
It's not electronically fuel injected,
No,
which
it
is
came
kind of
with-
cool.
It came with 6 48 millimeter IDA Webers, and we couldn't get it to run. Every port went to a cylinder, and there was no common plenum.
Right,
So we
right,
ended up
which makes
taking
it
the
tough.
Webers
Yeah.
off,
Tune.
Yep.
and Dale built this hand built this intake manifold for 3 600 Holley double pumpers.
Okay.
Right, right. Which made it, then that's when it started to run.
It,
right.
it ran just
correctly.
fine. It
Yeah.
idles. It'll idle down to 800 RPMs.
Yeah.
It's got air conditioning in the thing. I mean,
Wow.
it's just, it's Dale is a phenomenal engineer.
Yeah.
So what engine would that be commonly found in? I mean, obviously not in a 55 Chevy, but where did that come from?
Mostly they're marine engines. They still produce, it looks to me like an early Hemi that they added 4 cylinders onto.
Yeah.
And they're made in Italy by BPM Marine. You can still Google them. I ended up getting parts for them for another motor that I have. I've got another BPM that has got 4 turbos on it. And,
Right.
Borla fuel injection, electromotive crank trigger ignition that I was going to put in the 55 and take the carbureted one out. And the more I got thinking about it, it's really dumb. This thing runs so good.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, why do it? So now I'm going to have to put that one up for sale. And it's a running motor. It starts, it runs. It's got Ross pistons in the thing. We renitrided the crank.
Nice.
It's got Crowler billet steel rods in it.
Oh, man.
Electronic fuel injection. It's a bitchin' motor.
Nice.
Hey, we'd like to thank our sponsor, ARP-bolts.com. We got a fantastic little backdrop here. They make an outstanding series of bolts, almost anything you would need for engines, chassis, things like that. In fact, we were at lunch today, and a guy asked you about the bolt on the back of your shirt, and and I said, well, it's really about a head bolt. They neck the stem down of the bolt on a small block Chevy head bolt, so the clamp load is even across 3 different head bolt lengths on a small block Chevy. And, so that's the kind of technology that you get out of ARP. And we've all got stories on all that stuff.
For a
but,
translation of what he said, call arpbolts.com.
but the message is that you can't get any better than that.
No, you
So
cannot.
There
Yep.
you go.
Nope.
Excellent.
And then just check them out at arp-bolts.com. We'd like to thank our friends at inthegaragemedia.com. They have 3 fantastic magazines. They've got Classic Truck Performance, they have Modern Rotting, and my favorite, All Chevy Performance with Nick, my buddy Nick,
Oh,
is
you're
the
so
editor.
biased.
So, yes, of course.
Yes.
But they're doing print media, which
Yes.
is, of course, our favorite. So,
Tangible
color and
magazine.
everything.
in color and everything, and you can get your car on the cover of one of those books, which is
Right.
a fun
that's a
deal.
lot.
Great
Yeah.
tech.
Great
Written
tech.
by you
know,
and others
not always
that are
written by me, but yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Not
yeah.
always written by me.
That's right.
Just
So
pick it
check
up and
them out
read it.
at inthegaragemedia.com, and they're our friends, and they will thank you. Yeah, it's funny when people, because I've been to shows since then with where your car is there, and people look up and go, wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's too many cylinders on this side. What is this? Because it's got Chevrolet script valve cover
Oh,
on
yeah.
it. Right. That so it fools a lot of people.
Right, right.
So, but we don't even want to talk about that car. I want to talk about the 57. So how do we describe this thing? Pro street car,
Pro Street.
because it's got funny car tires on it.
35, 22.5, 16, Hoosier, Street Pro. tires on the back. It's the largest tire I believe that you could have bought that it's a DOT approved tire.
Yeah. And there's like this much room between the inner sidewalls for your rear end.
Yeah, it's a little bit more than that, but not much.
And the shocks are up on top.
The shocks are in the back window.
Well, on a rocker system.
Correct.
Right?
Nice.
Okay. But that's just the frame. That's just the frame around the picture. The real picture is the engine. And I'll let you describe engines. So the quickie description is and this is what you did to me. You said, it's got a W24. And then waited for my response and was like, what am I supposed to do with that? So explain where the W24 comes from.
It's two 5.4 liter BMW V12s.
V12s.
They're out of 2001 750 IL BMWs. They're really reasonable. I bought two of them from a wrecking yard in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and talked to Dale. And this is still when he's working on the 55. We're finishing the 55.
Okay.
So I bought this 57 Chevy from a gentleman. It came with an Alston tube chassis kit. So he started on the 57 while we were getting the 55 painted.
Okay.
And the engine, we'll go back to the engines. They are side by side. They're 60-degree V12s, tipped about
like this.
Well, they're tipped.
Yeah.
So the center cylinders are vertical.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So if you envision a W,
Right.
the center cylinders are the inner portions of the W.
Right.
And the header tubes have to come. They're basically aimed at each other.
Yeah. The center tubes. There's 12 individual primary tubes out of the top 6 cylinders.
Yeah.
And there's six primary tubes out of the bottom cylinders on each engine.
Side.
Yeah.
Right.
And on the bottom of each engine, there are 3 tubes that go to a collector. The next 3 cylinders, those 3 tubes go to a collector.
Right.
And those 2 collectors merge into another collector.
And that's just one side of the
That's
dual exhaust.
one side of the 6 cylinders.
So did you ever count up the number of individual, because he did individual pieces of tubing, maybe about this long, to bend to a certain thing to put this puzzle together. So we'll post images of this thing. The first time I saw the car in person, you told me, gave me the address to meet me here. It was during the Summer Nationals. And
Right.
I drove up there, and I just went, and Dale had the nose lifted open, and I just stood there. I was like, how do you build something like that? I was just in awe.
Well,
it's just amazing.
Well, I've done a lot of spark plug changes in gunnels of offshore boats, and sometimes even they're so tight you have to pull the engine out just to change plugs. So is this very similar?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Everything, Dale designed it around the fact you can get it all 24 spark plugs.
Oh, beautiful.
You know, and it's all done so nicely that we've had the engine out of the car on a test stand, and it ran. The first time it cranked over,
You have to run that clip.
it ran.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Oh, I was flabbergasted.
So let's fast forward now, or jump to, because there's tons of stories to talk about. But right away, the more technical oriented readers are going, well, wait a minute, you've got 2 separate crankshaft outputs, but you're only going to have 1 transmission input. So how does that work?
There is a gear case that Carl Weplow at Atlas Tractor in Minneapolis. They build all of these gear cases for multi-engine tractors. So
Those big tractors that have like 4 engines, right?
I contacted him and I said, here's what we want to do. Excuse me. So there's a 1-inch aluminum adapter on the back of the motors that keep the cranks on 12-inch centers.
Okay.
Then on the back of that, there's a 4-inch gear case. There are 5 gears in the gear case. Both engines, the cranks rotate in the same direction. They're not reverse rotation engines.
Okay.
Both cranks operate in the same direction. And then there are 5.5-inch gears, and then there's another gear between them. All 3 are on the same plane. The center gear does not touch the 2 crankshaft gears.
It's essentially an idler.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Then above each of the crankshaft gears, there are 2 more gears that touch the crankshaft gears. The cranks go this way, the idlers touch those, they go this way, and those 2 gears touch the center gear, which turns its rotation around the same, and that's what drives the transmission.
It's almost like a gear drive, kind of like a Pete Jackson gear drive.
Yeah.
Right,
essentially.
exactly. Yeah. So that alone is a piece of engineering.
Oh, and then then to get it started, I contacted Don Mazier for a starter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We got one of his big Pro Stock starters on it. It started the thing right up.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, kudos. He makes some good pieces.
Oh.
and
Really
it
nice
uses
guy,
a steel primer, a planetary gear,
Yep.
because the cheap ones that not the cheap ones, but the OEMs you buy, actually the gear around the outside is plastic, and they would destroy themselves very quickly. But he makes steel gears, and that's what makes them work. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing.
The only issue that we're going to potentially run into on the car is to mount the starter. It had to be in a certain position with the way the flywheel was and the gear case was. It hangs down below the engine, probably an inch. So we're either going to have to put a skid plate underneath it, or figure out if we can do another nose on the starter to move it up.
To raise it
I
up.
tried to rotate the body of the starter, but it hits on the gear case when I try to rotate it to get it out of the way of the bottom of the engine.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Right.
when you think about the engineering that is involved with this thing, Dale is I mean, that's hero status stuff.
And he does it he doesn't have a cell phone, he doesn't have a computer, and he did it all on his own. I mean,
Wow.
he took individual pieces of tubing that we got from Speedway and welded them all together.
For the
Nice.
exhaust system.
For the exhaust system.
Did he count the number of pieces?
I doubt it, but I can count it with the number of welds that he did on
Yeah.
that.
It's got to be like 60 or 70 or
easy.
80 pieces and it's a puzzle.
And then
pieced it together and then had to weld the whole thing together.
And then you've got to put them all back into the car.
Yeah.
So
it's got to be able to fit once it's all welded together.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And individual
yeah.
tubes. I had to stamp a number on each one of them to figure out passenger and driver's side, 1, 2, 3, 4,
So
5,
they don't
6.
get confused.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh,
you got to
my
look
God.
at them and figure out. It took me about 2 hours to put it back together once we'd taken it apart after we'd had the engine out and put the engine
and
back
take
in.
a lot of photos of it to make
Oh,
sure you get it back
exactly.
to it. Yeah, because
Very.
there's no Chilton book that's going to tell you how to put it back together.
How do I do this? AutoZone?
So, it's just a phenomenal. And then the transmission behind it is
A 700 R4.
the 700R4.
Wow.
Which you probably, but you're not gonna be aggressive with this car because you can't
No.
be, because it's not,
I've
there's
got
no
a
reason to.
I've got a 4L80E in the 55, and more than likely I probably should have done that. But Bob Benson at Speedway, at Speed Gems in Minneapolis, is the one that did the transmission. And, for some reason they wanted to go with the 700 R4, and he did some internal work on the thing, but it's never going to be drag raced.
Well, there's no gear multiplication in your gearbox.
No.
So it would be, and how much torque do those engines make?
They're like 320 some foot-pounds.
Okay, so that
Yeah.
would be roughly 600 foot-pounds of
Yeah.
torque.
Yeah.
With gear loss and everything else.
I
So
mean,
that's not super excessive.
It's a 700's limit, but it's
right there, yeah. But it
yeah.
would probably be survivable.
Well,
Yeah.
if the-
and then you
if-
got a 9-inch rear end in the back.
9-inch rear end with, I think we put 488 gears in the thing because of the tall tires.
Because
Yeah,
of the tall
yeah.
tires,
Yeah.
sure. Oh, yeah.
Right.
That probably equates to probably a 3.0 gear in reality.
We did figure it out. It's like in the 310s or
310.
320s.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you decide to hook it up, something's going to break.
Right. Well, that big of a tire, even spinning a 700R, you're going to spin the output
Yeah.
shaft right out of the
Yeah.
back of it. But I'm
But-
sure that
and
miles
then-
an hour like crazy though. It probably goes. You need to go to Bonneville.
So then you had to lengthen the nose to give you enough room to make it fit, right?
No.
No?
It is a stock wheelbase car. It's a 115-inch wheelbase
You
car.
moved the wheelbase
We moved the
forward.
wheelbase
That's
forward.
Right. That's
Okay,
right. That's
okay.
right. Because it does look altered.
Exactly.
Yes. And then you end up cutting out the rear wheel external wheel wells to allow you to be able to change the tires.
From the door to the upper trim molding on the 57, all the way back to the taillight, each of the rear fenders is removable.
Oh, it would have to be. There'd have
Because
to be. Right.
those are essentially funny car tires
Oh,
back
yeah.
there. So
Yeah.
yeah. That's amazing.
I think I might have said 30. They're 35 22.5s.
35.
Jesus.
Woo!
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like an off-road tire.
Yeah.
So we'd like to thank our sponsor, ARP and ARP-bolts.com. And we all three build cars. We all work on this stuff. And
I tinker.
You tinker.
I tinker.
Yes, we all build.
Yeah, and you know what? It's kind of a really cool multiple purpose fastener for me because there's all the science and all the technology, which is bottomless. Trust me. Unbelievable amount of research that they put into these things.
Absolutely.
And on top of it, you get them out of the package, and they're absolutely beautiful. Which I've joked before, it's like jewelry for your
Right.
car. And
They're
when
pre-oiled.
we're building
Yep.
when we're building a high end car, there isn't anything else going on it. It's part of the criteria for me to have them lining the engine bay, not just on the engine, everywhere.
Yeah.
So you get all the strength, the durability, the reliability, and fantastic good looks.
Sure.
Kind of like Jeff here.
And without peer. Without peer.
With,
Anybody
and
else
you
better?
know what?
Or pairs.
Without peer, there's nobody else
Correct.
that does
That
what they
is,
do.
it is. So check them out at arp-bolts.com, and they can help you out. So, and there's so many pieces. I remember when the first time I was talking to Dale, and I was looking at the car, and he showed me how the front end articulated, and we started talking about it. And so he had prior experience with the 55. So explain how he did that, because the 55 is a piece of artwork in terms of the way the hood articulates, right?
The 55, normally you just grab the latch and lift the hood up on a 55.
Right.
This way he's got the original latch in the standard position. You pull it and it pops up in the back, and he's got it on a set of rods that it will articulate forward and tilt to 90 degrees, clearing the grill.
Yeah.
And you can take the
That's
whole-
right, because the grill has to clear the bumper because the
Right.
bumper's not moving.
Right, the bumper stays there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the whole hood is removable with 4 pit pins, 2 on each side. You can take the pins off, take the
And
hood
take the
off.
hood off independently.
And then
right.
you latch it back down, and the whole front end tips 90 degrees forward. There's a pit pin at the bottom of each one. There's a stud at the bottom of each of the fenders. You open the doors, and you take the nuts off the studs, and the whole front end will tip forward 90 degrees.
Wow.
And that is removable with 2 pit pins that it pivots on.
Well, that's how you're changing spark plugs. I mean, come on, that's kind of cheating when you think about it.
That's nice, though. It's like a race car. Now you
yeah.
have access to it easily. Yeah.
The problem is I have to have my wife help me. Linda's learned how to help me open and close the front end.
That's cool.
good.
That's very cool. So that was the 55, and that kind of gave him, because the 57 was even more of a challenge, right?
Definitely.
Because is it longer?
No.
No, it's the same.
Yeah, they're the same.
The
Same
fenders are
length.
the same length.
Same.
But still, the challenge was there to be able to clear it, because again, the bumper stays where it is.
Exactly.
And the front end has to clear it, so it has to go out over it, right?
Right now, we've modified the way that Dale did the opening of the front end.
Mm-hmm.
He had it on a screw jack, a linear actuator that it opened 90 degrees.
Okay.
And it's basically on 2 Hymens on the front that it pivots on that. But it was kind of a messy job. It didn't look right.
Okay.
So now Dave Torrey at Absolute Engineering in Santa Barbara, where the car is now being
Mm-hmm.
finished, he's got it on a single air cylinder.
Nice.
Okay.
So it will open to about 45 degrees. It just pops right open and stays there. And it eliminated a lot of the mess
Okay.
that was
Yeah,
involved
it
in
was
the
much
screw.
cleaner then.
Oh,
Yeah,
much
yeah,
cleaner.
Yeah. Wow.
That's neat, though.
Because
That's-
every step along this way, there was, I mean, you had to have nights or days or weeks of engineering thought behind it just to say, and I mean, was there some considerations about, well, if we do this, are we able then to be able to do this?
Oh.
That's the stuff that I think is probably the most challenging.
Well, and then I said to Dale, because I've got air conditioning in the 55 and it's in the trunk and it's marginal as far as, cooling the car down. I said, can we put air conditioning in this 57? And he says, well, let's take a look at it. So he had to add the compressor onto the engine with the 2 V12s. Then he had to put all of the condensers and everything else underneath the dash.
Oh, my God.
wow.
Oh,
Yep,
man.
it's underneath the dash. Woo. And it's got air conditioning in the car. And wait until you see the openings. There's 4 swivel openings where the air conditioning comes out. I had a friend of mine make autometer decals for the 4 openings that they will swing 180, and they look like gauges.
That's cool.
Really?
Oh yeah,
That's
and I'm not
funny.
telling you what they are, but it's
Yeah.
it's really
Rocket
interesting.
fuel.
Probably Mach meters.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Something.
no, they look really cool, and it's got twin radiators on it. The aluminum radiators are on the front, are twin radiators side by side.
yeah.
Side by side.
Side
Okay.
by side.
Uh-huh.
So we've had it on the test stand with it running. It ran. It was.
And you have enough airflow to keep them cool?
It seemed to be.
Yeah.
I'm sitting behind the car on a seat and looking at it while Dale is running the engine, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, and we were looking at the temperature gauge because he got the temperature gauge on the front, and it's starting to creep up and a little more and a little more. And I'm thinking, it shouldn't do this because the fans came on the radiators, and I sat behind it and I looked and I could see this cardboard. And I'm looking at it, and I got closer after we'd shut it down. We'd forgotten to remove the cardboard off both radiators.
To protect the radiators.
Yep.
You were putting them in.
And I go, what the heck? So we ended up pulling the cardboard out, and it makes it a lot
a lot more efficient that way.
Yeah.
You get some airflow through
Oh,
there.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And the shocks in the front are cantilevered in the standard location in front of the engines.
Okay.
And the front
So they're
bumper
also on rocker arms.
rocker arms. The front bumper is removable. The rear bumper was removable until we decided to change the deck lid to be opening, and the second half of the rear trunk lid now is welded to the car, and the rest of the deck lid from the license plate up now lifts up.
Okay.
And the 22-gallon fuel cells in the back. The batteries on the right-hand side. There's 2 fuel pumps and filters down below that in a cavity.
Yeah.
It's just, Dale is such an engineer that I look at pictures now and I'm amazed at all of the things that he was able to do without any engineering training. He's done this all on his own.
And that says something, because my grandfather used to say there are book learned mechanics and then there are real mechanics. And I think he qualify as a real engineer, even though he doesn't have the piece of paper that says, but yet maybe not the math part of it, but it doesn't matter because he understands mechanics and I need to get from here to there. How do I do that? And do it properly.
That's the same thing that happened with the headers, because you've got to go around the chassis tubes.
Yep.
You've got to clear the spark plugs. You've got the steering shaft running behind them.
Right.
And it's just, it's a nightmare. The driver's side is a real nightmare. You ought to see the steering shaft going down to the rack and pinion. It is so close to the headers, but it clears them.
It clears. Yeah.
I'm sure it looks like a Tinker Toy set with all the Heim joints and all the the universal joints, but still.
Yeah.
So how many years in the process?
It's probably been 8 years now since the whole project was started.
Yeah.
And
there's been a lot of downtime, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but a car like that, I mean, you don't just that's something you're just going to put together and let's go to SEMA show. I mean, this is something that's got to take some time to put together and engineer.
Right.
And that's what I would like to do. I want to debut the car at the Grand National Roadster Show.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to make it for next year, but I don't think it'll be done.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It'll
been this
be done
long.
when it's done.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. So just an amazing vehicle, because there's so much to talk about. So, I mean, did you do like a drawing of the car first, or what was the conceptual part? How did that start?
I think we started out with, that's a good question. We started out with the tubing chassis and went from there. And then I don't know how we came up with the twin V12s. It was probably a collaboration with Dale and I. Said, can we do this? And Dale has never said no.
Kind of like a tape measure kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
well,
It's 40
it looks like it'll fit.
Yeah, it's 42 inches wide, so it'll fit between. And then he just built the chassis around the engines.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Just amazing.
It's usually the other way around. That's what's so funny about it. It's usually like, here's what you get to start with. Does it fit in there? Well,
Because that's how a lot of hot rodding is. It's like, I got this motor and I got this car.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's put them together.
Right.
And that was, I figured that's probably how it kind of started. But and then let's just take, instead of one V12, let's put two of them.
Right.
If a little's good, more's better. Too much is just right.
Too much is just right.
Right.
Yeah. So, what color? What color are you going to paint the car? Have you decided?
Well,
yet?
I'm pretty darn sure it's going to be bright orange with kind of an argent insert in the back. I'm not going to put that Chevy insert in the back, where the between the trim. I'm going to paint that.
Yeah, okay.
We're going to have to paint the bumpers because the bumpers have been modified in both ends, so they wouldn't take chrome.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's got a raised hood. The 6 pipes, 12 pipes in the center. There is a louvered section that Dale built by hand that's in the center of the hood near near the cowl.
Oh, like a
Right,
heat
like a
deflector?
heat shield, yeah.
Heat
Yeah.
deflector.
Yeah.
And there is an opening in the front of the hood that air will come down there and deflect the air out of there, hopefully
Okay.
to eliminate some
Because
of the heat.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of this before, but there's an issue with the carburetors.
Oh, yeah.
right? Because you don't want to have a ton of heat trapped
Sure.
under the hood. Could just boil the fuel out of the carburetor.
Well, and Dale's so old school, everything basically had to be, and I'm in agreement, had to be, carburetors, not fuel injection, because we'd put the 3600s on the 55 and it's run perfectly. So now I talked to Holly, and they were nice enough to get me 7 carburetors, three for the 55 and 4 for the 57. These are 400 400 CFM carburetors.
Okay.
The old tunnel ram style
The old
carburetor.
mechanical.
I think they're 450s. Yeah.
450. Yeah.
And 2 on each side. And the linkage, just the carburation linkage is a work of art. Just goes all the way around the front.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. That's an issue right there because you got 4 carburetors,
Yeah.
right? So
2 for each engine.
You know what this reminds me of is, do you guys remember that old Porky Pig cartoon where there's the car race and there's the evil guy that's driving car 13 and he's got an oil can outside of the, he's oiling the lifters as he's driving down there and there's spirits coming out of the carburetors like that. This is totally I have this vision of like this guy driving that. Is that kind of what you were going for?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, right?
No, I'm going to sit back and turn the air conditioning on and hopefully it doesn't overheat.
Right? Yeah.
yeah. So this is because cars have been built like that. I remember somebody somewhere built a 55 Chevy with an Allison aircraft engine in it, and then discovered after they built it that it couldn't cool it.
I was going to say.
It didn't have a big enough radiator to cool it.
Right.
But it really wasn't a real, I think it was in Australia, wasn't it? Something like
this
that?
was, yeah.
It looked like an airplane. I think they had bullet holes on the side of the thing. I think they even tried to sell the thing at the Barrett-Jackson auction several years ago.
Really, yeah. So, but this is a real deal. I mean, you're not just not like because there are art cars too. I think Jay Leno's got a couple of the tank engine car and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they're it does run, but they're not real cars. But this is a real car.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing about, like I said earlier, like to know that you said, okay, I want to start out with a 57 Chevy, but then I want to put 2 engines in it. Someone even saying if you're gonna put 2 small blocks in it, that would be, that's already a feat.
exactly.
Then you're like, no, I have 2 BMW V10s, right?
V12s.
V12, sorry.
V12s.
So now you have 2 BMW V12s that are in it. So you're 24 cylinders. You're like, yeah, forget your V8 stuff, right?
So literally, it came down to the fact that tape measure said,
Oh yeah,
it'll fit.
it'll fit.
Right.
You know what? If I had the time, effort, and energy, I'd do a 56 now with 3 6-cylinders, 1 center and 2 like this on kind of a.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, that would be cool. And I
That
talked to
would
Dale
be
about
cool.
that, but no.
You're like
It's past
You're like the
stage on that.
tractor pull of Tri-5s.
Yeah, I'd have 1 of each year.
Yeah.
One each year, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That is kind of intriguing.
Right.
12, 18, and 24.
Yeah.
That's
Right?
funny. That's funny.
Wow. Can't plug that in.
So where do these ideas come from? Just you sit around and think, let's do this.
Dale and I just sat around and, in the suicide doors on the 55 and then all this stuff on the 57. It just kind of comes to you. Sit there and say, yeah, can we do that? And he says, sure. And it's just been evolving for years.
And this really is a partnership deal because without him,
it would never
could have happened.
No,
Yeah,
never.
Yeah. So it's just amazing. And I should have probably come a little bit better prepared because I'm sure there's a million little things. Can you think of a couple of little things that you wouldn't even anticipate that were like, oh, we have to stop and do this before we can move on?
Well, cooling the gear case on the 57. When Carl made the thing, he made two 1/2-inch pipe hole, NPT holes in the bottom of each of the gear case that we're going to run to a pump to a cooler in order to circulate the fluid in the gear case.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now this was all done before we put the engine back in the car. And now each of those fittings interferes with the secondary exhaust pipe.
Okay.
So now we're going to have to address that.
Yeah.
And
maybe reposition them somehow, but you really can't do that
No.
because they have to be below the gear level.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the lube level, yeah.
And then one other thing is the valve cover, the outside valve cover on the driver's left-hand engine has the vent port that's right in the way of the Willwood power steering unit. It's like a half an inch away from it. So we got to figure out, I got another valve cover from a friend of mine that has the port on the front side of it. So all I have to do is paint that one and move that one to the front.
Okay.
So I've got
Yeah.
that one figured out.
I mean, I'm challenged by just figuring out, okay, there's like several different PCV valve grommets. And it's like, you don't have the right one, and it's so frustrating. I can't imagine that times 1,000 because there's a million things on your car that you're going to have to re-engineer because of what you're doing.
Well, and the rack and pinion that was in the car in the 57 for, construction purposes was kind of a junk rack. And I'd bought another rack from Speedway. And to get that rack out of there without completely disassembling the car was a major chore.
Right.
Oh, boy.
Right.
Yeah.
We ended up doing it. We ended up sliding out the side, but it wasn't easy to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that brings up something that I know you just did. So Dale built a test stand and then pulled the motor out of the car and ran it on the test stand.
Correct.
Yeah, because there's video of that. You have video of that we'll run because that I watched that video and it was, and like I said, fired right up.
It fired right up. And
That's
it ran,
amazing.
it was smooth. He played with the carburetors a little bit to get the tuning down. It was smooth. It had nice throttle response.
Yeah.
And the gear case, I don't think it howled or whined, which is good.
And those are all spur cut gears. They're
Right.
straight cut gears.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which way would be noisy. So again, a testament to the guys that built the box, the gear case, that they built it with probably very little backlash, so therefore it wouldn't be as noisy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because anybody who's ever driven a GM car with a Muncie Rock Crusher transmission, which is not a spur cut gear,
No.
or worse yet, and I have one of these, a Jericho 4-speed that are spur cut, they are ridiculously noisy.
You think they're the coolest thing when you
Ridiculously
first get them, and then like a week later, you're like, get me out of this
you're,
car.
You're going to put a bullet in your brain
Yes.
because you can't listen to it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was probably pretty cool when it ran. And a 12-cylinder engine by design is going to be smoother.
Right.
Right.
A 24 is even going to be smoother yet because I'd have to do the math, and I'm not good at doing this in my head. But the degrees of crankcase movement with each firing is. It's 50% better from a V8 to a V12, and then you're doing 24, so they're virtually overlapping each other.
We were going to try to fire it as a true 24-cylinder motor, but the gear case teeth count wouldn't allow us to do that.
Because it had to be astronomical.
Right. So now we're firing it as two separate engines.
Two separate
It's
engines.
got two electromotive crank trigger ignitions on it, firing off one pulley on one of the motors, and then it splits to each one of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Think about that for a little while. This wasn't supposed to be a technical dissertation, but it's like,
oh, you got my head spinning right now. I'm sitting here thinking, like, why aren't you using like an Olson oil cooler to then draw like some coolant through that sandwich adapter there that's got that log that you could then cool the gear case to? So I'm already nerding out on this. I'm like, this could go so many different places.
Yeah, and just the fact that it works as two separate engines because it could very easily not work. Now the other side of it is, I'll bet you could drop 4 or 5 cylinders and you'd never notice it.
Probably not.
Right?
Yeah, because
the gear case would notice it.
The gear
one's
case
going to be
would
running
notice,
a little bit
it would.
more.
You
right?
start backlashing.
Right,
then.
right.
But I remember one year. It was Fastest Street Car.
Okay.
And oh no, I'm gonna 53 Chevy that was my Corvette buddy. It was a 632. And he had killed 2 cylinders the final round of the Fastest Street Car when he lost the race. He didn't know it. He'd lost 2 cylinders, but it was a 632. And as radical as it idled, normally aspirated, you didn't hear it. You didn't know it until later. He started doing leak down tests and realized, or not leak down. He did a dynamic cylinder pressure test and realized, no, we're down 2 cylinders here.
Right.
But he didn't even hear it. You could have lost. You probably lose 6 or 7.
Okay, so
and still never notice it.
And this question comes up in my head. So if you shut the ignition off on one of the engines, right? I mean, obviously it's still going to, with the other engine,
Yeah.
would it still spin the other engine because of the gear case? Because it shares that common gear case.
I would sure think so.
I would
yes.
hope so.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because then even too, if you needed to shut that down and you still needed to be under power, then at least the gear case is still going to run the
Correct.
transmission. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We did take an exhaust temperature meter and checked every one of the cylinders when it was running to make sure each of the cylinders was firing.
Okay.
Oh
there
yeah,
you
that
go.
would be the
That'd
quickie
very
way to know
important.
if you've got a
Right.
dead cylinder.
Yeah.
You just take one of those infrared temperature guns. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Wow.
I know, this is crazy. This is making me, just like I said, my mind's spinning.
The image I always come back to is, I think I shot this, pretty sure I shot this photo looking down with the hood open, the front end up, and that bed of snakes deal coming out of the center, because it's just, there were so many pieces to that. And just as a puzzle, and I remember you guys, I think we had the car up in the air, or no, you sent me the photos of the individual collectors, 3 per collector, and there were, just
And
goes
just
on forever.
When we took it all apart, it's just marking everything to make sure I get it back on.
Right.
Yes.
You know, and I'm going, oh my gosh, am I going to get this on correctly? Before it left Minnesota for here in Santa Barbara, I had to make sure we put the exhaust system underneath it and the engine back in. We did not put the lower headers on.
Okay.
Because we didn't have time to do it.
Okay.
But I was worried about doing that, and I did it in Dave's shop. It took me a while to figure it out.
I was
going to
say, I would think too that there would be, you'd almost want to do like an assembly manual for the car, just so that you, because I know I got, this is an indication of having too many cars. It's like, how did I do this? I know I've done it 3 or 4 times. I can't remember how I did it. And you just have to dive into it and then realize about halfway through, you realize, nope, I'm doing this wrong. Right. I know what I need to do. And, because you've forgotten, when you only own one car, it's pretty easy, but
I have
this thing.
My God. I took major pictures of the exhaust.
You would have to
before we took it apart.
Yeah.
And some of the cylinders on the lower portion are studded, and some of them aren't, for the pipes to go up
just
in the
to
flange
kind of hold them on. Yeah.
Yeah. But,
right.
And so I have to put bolts in some of them and studs in other ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and luckily we don't have to take the top 12 pipes off. They are staying on.
Okay. So
They're staying on. So I've got to take all the bottom 12 apart to get it out of the car to clear all the tubing for the chassis.
So is that did you create like a top section and then have like a flange that had like a bottom section that kind of unbolted out? Is that how you did it?
For the exhaust?
Yeah.
No, he did every one of them by hand.
No, but I mean, to get it out of the car, do you have like a top header piece and then like a flange and then the bottom, or is it just all like one big header?
A long tube back to the three collector.
Wow.
It's all one piece.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Call.
That's what I mean. It's oh my God.
I'd love to see you take a picture of this and send it to like Hedman Headers or something to be like, hey, can I get some tech on this?
Yeah.
Will this fit in my '57 Chevy?
There's a company on the internet, and they're out of Colorado. I contacted them and tried to see if they were interested in some heat shielding for the thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll sell it to you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Wow.
Man.
Wow.
So do you have like a vision of what you want to do with this car at when it's done? It's all done? Other than just take it to a show? Is there something else?
I want to drive the thing. I don't think it's going to go very far. It's not going to go as far. I've driven the 55 from our home in Santa Barbara to Ventura to a Cars and Coffee at the Murphy Museum, and then we went over to Santa Paula to the airport, and that was a 100-mile road trip, and it got 8 miles to the gallon.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Fine.
Actually, that's not bad. For
730 cubic inches.
Exactly.
My turbo truck.
So when the 57,
like 5 miles a gallon.
when the 57's done, I plan on showing it hopefully initially at the Grand National Roadster Show and then doing some car shows with it. But I do plan on driving the car.
Yeah.
I would.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You're going to need, what you need is you need a video to describe some of this stuff, because at the show, if you're there, there's going to be a bazillion questions.
He's going to have to hand out tablets to people just to say, here you go, scroll through.
Yeah.
Right. Even at the gas station, he's going to go, here you go, I'm filling the thing with gas. Go ahead and take a look at the tablet. Wow.
Yeah. It's just an amazing package of how this all fit together.
Yeah.
And that's really the thing. It's I guess the way to describe it the best would be something like a 3-dimensional puzzle.
Oh, yeah.
Like a Rubik's Cube that you got to assemble. My brother-in-law gave me one of these things one time. He built it out of wood, one of those 3-dimensional puzzles. Right. And took it apart and said, here, put it back together. And I just walked away. I'm just not good at that at all.
And now Dave Torrey at Absolute Engineering has to finish it, and he's got his work cut out for him. The body work has to be done.
Because he's coming in after the fact.
Yeah.
But he wasn't intimidated by it. Kudos to him, man. I would have looked at it and said, do you want me to work on this? No.
Yeah, he's done some phenomenal work on the rear quarters, on the hood opening, and he's doing a bunch of things on shutting the hood, getting that to work. And it's still probably, I want to say 70% done now, but he's got to finish it. Then the body work is, it still needs to be done, and you know, Dale built it so you can take the chassis off the frame.
Okay.
The body off the chassis.
Off the chassis.
Yeah.
Yeah. So which would probably make it easier
Yep.
because then that won't
Yeah.
abuse the car as much
Right.
when they go to paint it. So
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
This is funny because you could go to a Tri-5 Chevy event, park your car, and you have 3 engines, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you could literally tell somebody like, well, I have 3 engines, you have 1, right?
Yeah, when I pull into with the 55 in most events, before I open a door that's suicide or before I open the hood, most people just look at it as a stock appearing 55.
Yeah. This turquoise and white
Yeah.
55.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
then-
then all of a sudden it starts to like transform.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Well, we could do this for another hour, but we're right. We're there, right? Okay. So, but we do want to talk about the 55 because we could easily do a show on that car too. And the original 55 is that's harder because people look at it with 2022 eyes and or concepts or preconceptions. And I tell people all the time, you really have to go put yourself back in 1977.
Yeah.
And, of course, the younger people go, wasn't even born yet.
Right.
But, to really appreciate it because that car blew me away.
Well, and that's the genius of you guys is that, you guys didn't have CNC computers or you didn't have something to test out and let's run a program to see if this works. It was like tape measure, cut it. Oh, that didn't work. Start over. Yep. Right. I mean, it was trial and error. It wasn't just
blowing
this
big block Chevy
Yeah,
back
yeah.
in that year. I remember taking it down, and it's one of the cruising streets in St. Paul. I'd make this short. And I'm going down the street, and this 2 guys were walking down the street looking at me, and one guy walked right into a parking lot.
Yeah.
Wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's great.
That's when you know you've arrived.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Boom, right?
Right.
Okay, well, we got to do this again. We got to come back and do the 55 for sure. Maybe we'll combine the black car and the turquoise and white car together maybe. But, I mean, this has been a lot of fun. So I hope you appreciate it as much as we've had fun delivering this to you. We've had a great time. Thank you, Gary, for helping us
Jeff,
out with this whole thing.
thank you so
Thanks
much for
stepping
inviting
in
me.
For my absent partners.
This is true.
And we're going to keep doing this for you. We'll keep telling you stories.